Okay, animation, welcome back. We are at part 7 of our part 10 animation process series, and this one might be a doozy, just to give you a bit of heads up. So you might want to take a break in between, and I'll give you a few points. But I'm going to try and go through it fast. It's really just a matter of correcting and evaluating on your own. But there's a lot to cover, so let's get over it. So we've now made tangents, and as you can see, it's streaming by right here. And we're going to try and fix as much as we can before hopping into the graph editor. Basically, the more you correct here, it's basically every step. The better work you do on these steps makes it less work on the following subsequent steps. So the more you do now, the less you do later. That's just kind of the way it works here. So keep that in mind. Also, I know a lot of you are vehemently opposed to the graph editor, so try and fix as much as you can before diving in to the graph editor to make your life easier. So, the goal here is to correct your poses and to correct your animation by rekeying them, adding more breakdowns, or just fixing these up as best you can. So you don't want to dive into the graph editor, but you want to definitely use the dope sheet at some point, and you're going to fix most of these things by adding keyframes, deleting keyframes on specific parts or pieces, moving the timing on the dope sheet, and maybe just repositioning stuff on current frames. We're going to also operate in this order. We're going to really focus on timing first, and then we're going to kind of look and work our way up. So first we're going to deal with his feet, waist, then go all the way up through the spine, and then the arms. So you kind of work your way down, and you work your way back up. So timing deals with everyone, and then we go through that. So let's get started on our project. Here is Link. He is falling. He is doing his thing. He's tangented out very nicely. However, there's still some issues, and we're going to fix those issues. The first thing you want to do is you want to go to your Maya, and you want to go to Preferences here, and you want to double check that you've changed your auto keying into your in tangent and your out tangent. You want to change those into auto. That way when you make new keyframes, it doesn't go to stepped, it goes to auto. So once again, that's under Maya. This is just double checking. We did this last assignment, but it's always good to double check. And it's under Settings, and then it's under Animation. And you change default in tangent to auto. It was linear, now it's auto. And then you go default out tangent, and it was stepped, and now it's auto. Plus, I like to have the auto key on, and I like to auto key where it's keying all attributes. There are some people that like to have just what gets modified, meaning if I only rotate it on the x-axis, it only keys the x-axis and it doesn't key any of the other axes. I don't like that. I like to key all. It's a matter of preference, I believe. So I'm going to hit save, and luckily, my Link, he's pretty good. At least he's pretty good in terms of speaking with the graph editor. Now I told you, once you insert the object and then you go to splines, you're going to mess with the timing, and you're going to need to redo the timing a bit. But I'm not going to fix that just yet. I'm actually going to save that issue for later. For the most part, when he's doing his sword stuff, he has a sword in hand, and for when he doesn't have his sword stuff, he does not have his sword in hand. There's just a little mix-up right here, and that's fine. I'm going to fix that in step 10 in the polishing thing. I'm not, because otherwise I'm going to have to fix it every single step. All right. Enough said, let's do some animation. So the first thing I want to do is play with timing. So I'm going to grab the hierarchy, and I'm going to reposition it so I can see everything on the dope sheet. Now when you think about timing, right, you should be playing with the dope sheet. When we're talking timing, think dope sheet. So let's just kind of, what you want to do is you want to play through it, and you want to see if something's moving too slow or moving too fast, which some of these things are. So let's look at the fall. The fall happens a little slow, but I'm actually going to save that for the graph editor, and I'll show you what I mean in a bit. Okay? So the ending here is a little slow, and he reaches that part, could be a little quicker, and then the steps could be a little quicker in my opinion, and that's about it. So now that you've seen it spline out, sometimes you want to retime it. So I like his hit. I'm actually going to change the speed of this in the graph editor later. So do know that I think that I could fix that and make that better. And then his head pops up. And again, I'm going to fix that a little bit more in the graph editor. Just, you're going to have to trust me. But then when he sees it, he goes to here. And then he steps up. I want these closer together. So I want his head looking up. Head looks up. And then body comes up. I want this happening a little sooner. So I'm going to take this keyframe and move it. So all I'm doing is, now that I've seen it splined out, I'm going to take this guy and move it faster. Now I'm going to talk about what I call a hold. So for example, with his head moving up, I want him to kind of stay like that before he erects himself. So I'm going to take this pose where his head kind of pops up. I'm going to middle mouse click it. So middle mouse clicking is not your left click, not your right click. There's either your wheel or the button in the middle of your mouse. And if you middle mouse click that, it'll hold all the data. So I'm going to middle mouse click it down a few frames to, like, let's say 34. And notice he hasn't moved when I middle mouse click and slide it up and down the slider. So I middle mouse click to 34 and I'm going to press S. So what this does now is it gets him looking up, and then he comes up and steps in. And the only problem with this middle mouse click trick is that he looks very stiff for 4 frames. If I play it, he looks very, very stiff. So it's a quick solution. Even though I've taken most of that data, I'm just going to take him and kind of just give him a little bit of movement on just like 1 or 2 positions here. And now what I've done is I've made it look so he doesn't look so stiff. And then he pops up. And then this part I want happening quicker. So again, I'm just doing some timing adjustments. Now that I've actually seen it in action, you have to do your timing in the dope sheet if you have the entire hierarchy selected. And I'm going to shift that over to somewhere right around, let's say there. Maybe it's a little too close. Right there. And then his grab is right here. I want that happening quicker. So this as well. I might have to move the whole group. And then when he actually grabs it, boom. And then he lifts his sword up. And this part I can have slow. I am going to have him spring up quicker, but that's going to be in the graph editor. So I just wanted him to grab his sword a little quicker. Now that I've actually seen it split. Yeah, there we go. All right. Now, I talked about those holds again, and let's look at, now that we've tangented this out, some of you might have these sweeping moments. If I didn't have this keyframe here, he would be in this constant movement. So I'm actually just going to show you what would happen if I didn't have this hold here. So I'm just going to delete it very quickly. Right-click delete. And just notice how he swipes, or he sweeps the sword for way too long. Let me do that again for you. And he's never in this like constant held movement. So a way to make that happen is to do the middle mouse trick. So this is the pose I want to hold for a while. I will middle mouse click to about 90 and press S. And now he'll actually hold that position as he moves. And again, he looks way too solid or statuesque. So what you want to do is at 90, just give him a few changes, right? Just give him a little bend down, a little arm up. Now I already did this though in my breakdown because I knew that was going to happen. And that was the part where I was telling you to do that. So just to kind of show you, I'm just going to undo it until it comes back. So, but middle mouse clicking helps, middle mouse clicking and then pressing S helps create these holds that make him hold his position longer. Because you don't want him constantly moving, right? You want to give him some pauses, some dramatic stiffness, but you also don't want him statuesque. So you got to middle mouse click, press S, and then make some small adjustments. Now these are all timing adjustments. We haven't even looked at his feet yet. We haven't even looked at anything else. So then he slices. Let's see how the speed looks for the slice. Whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. I like that. That looks pretty good. So I don't need to make any timing and just whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. If I wanted to, I could have him hold this stab a little bit longer. Again, same trick. Middle mouse click, slide it over to like 16, press S. So for 6 frames, he's holding it. boom, shoom, shoom. Now that's a little too stiff. Do you guys see how stiff he is? Bam, bam, bam. So once again, on 16, I'm just going to have him lunge a little bit more forward. Right? Just a little bit. And maybe have his head kind of bend down, have him lurch forward. Just a fraction of a change. So now he doesn't seem like a statue. Boom, 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 right? So his feet are still, everything else is still, but it looks a lot better. Boom, boom, boom. He's actually holding that stab. So that's called making a hold. So I've done that a couple times, and I've shown you how to readjust your timing. You should be very used to the dope sheet by now and readjusting your timing. So this is a student example, and then you didn't see it in Link, but some of you are going to experience when you go from steps to tangents, you're going to experience what's called an over-rotation. And there's 3 ways to fix this. The first way is to do some math and recalculate exactly how this guy was spinning. And you can do that in your channel box. Another way is to do it in the graph editor. And the last way is to kind of delete it and rekey it. And I'm going to show you all 3 ways real quickly and how you'd fix each one. So the first part is to fix an over rotation like this. Don't panic when you see something that happens around frame 130, which is that little twist. So what happened here and why this happened was that when you're making your step, you spun him over 360 degrees, but because it was stepped, you didn't see the change. You didn't see it actually, so it looks like he's breakdancing when really it's happening. So one thing you could do is you can say, before the change happens, right, is you can look at frame 130, and it's rotate 0, rotate 8, rotate 0 again for the XYZ that's right up here. And I can go into 140 as I spin him, and notice that's 377 degrees. So I want to make that, instead of negative 377, what's 360 minus 377? That's a negative 17. So I'm going to make that a negative 17. And this one's a negative 360. It looks like I just really messed that one up and gave him an extra spin. I'm going to put 0 on that. And notice if I'm on my auto keyer, but I can also choose key selected if I want to be safe. And now he should not rotate. So that's doing it by math. Now it happens here again like that, right? So another way I could fix that is I could just say, do you know what? Let's just delete this keyframe. If I right click and choose delete that keyframe, now he's kind of respun back that way. I can just recompensate him like so and see how that works. Oops. So it looks like my deleting technique isn't going to work. So the other way to do it is to also delete this guy. So you might have to delete several keyframes on the waist, and that should do it. So I deleted the last 3 keyframes, and now he's not bending, and then I can just reposition him to kind of fit that better. Another way to do it, so I could delete keyframes, I could do math and recalculate the keyframes. Another way to do it is, let's look at the shoulder here real quick. The shoulder kind of elevates itself and does a super spin right around here, and it might become apparent on the graph editor. Now I know I said no graph editor, but the graph editor can really fix this one very easily. So if I go to my shoulder right here and go to Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor, and I hit A to resize everything, well, these are my 2 rotations, rotate Y and rotate Z, right? And they've clearly jumped 360 degrees. So I might, and just checking the red, my red didn't have that spin. So I can go to rotate Y and rotate Z. It looks like they're both rather even. I can select the entire group of keyframes that are misaligned, press the Move tool, W, hold the Shift key, and slide them down. And notice you can see him kind of unspinning himself until it gets to the position I want, which is somewhere where I think the student wanted, somewhere right around there. So now he shouldn't have that crazy 360 spin. So, 3 ways to fix over rotations. 1, with the graph editor to just delete some keyframes. The other thing I could have done is in the graph editor said, you know what, it's not working, goodbye. That would have also gotten rid of it. Or 3, I could have also just reconfigured the math here for every single keyframe, but that would have taken a long time. So if it's early on in the thing, you might want to just go to the graph editor and readjust it very quickly, and it should be fine. I emphasize should. 2, you could also just delete keyframe. I think he has another over rotation right here, and this one could be solved a lot more easily just by deleting the keyframe. So he goes here to throw, and the keyframe gets messed up. So just right here, I can delete that keyframe, and then I can just reposition it to how I want. The character's supposed to be thrown. So that's how you can fix over rotations. That's step 1. So if you need to retime stuff, that's what you want to do. Don't forget the middle mouse click, that's MMC right here, and press S. Let's talk about the feet. So also, before I even talk about the feet, don't be afraid to delete a keyframe if it's not working. That's right click on your slider here, or you can do it up here. And don't be afraid to add extra keyframes. Do more breakdowns if need be. And you're going to see that happening on my next example. Now, while there are still some issues with mine, they're very subtle and very minute. So I wanted to give you some more obvious details. So here is a student example that kind of shows a little bit better as to what needs to get fixed. There you go. And this is with Hogan. And I'm not even going to use the dope sheet for now. So take a look, and here's a lot more problems when you change it out. So let's talk about this for a second. Look at his feet. His feet don't move up and down, they slide. He's very stiff. He has what we call over rotations. Look at how much the hip moves and then how much the hip actually doesn't move up and down. There's a lot going on here. Look how stiff his spine is. Right? So there's a lot going on here. And this actually will probably show a lot more. You might not have all these problems, but you're definitely going to have some of these problems. So let's just keep going. So let's pretend I adjusted the timings on this example here. And let's look at the feet. Okay? So if your character is moving, there's a couple things you should know with the walk. Remember the walk cycle, first of all, right? And there's a couple things that you should see here that are happening. Number 1, the feet never move up, okay? So what you should do here is just kind of focus in just on the feet and really make the feet move up and down and look a little more believable. So I'm not even going to go to the graph editor, but I'm going to do a simple correction with the feet, right? So first of all, his feet are slip sliding around. So let's fix that. So at frame 10, his foot's there. 15, his foot starts to move forward to 20. Why don't I just have his foot stay on 20 where it's at? So I'm just going to get rid of this keyframe right here and keyframe number 10 as well. Just get rid of it. Now his foot's staying still. The same thing happens with his left foot. It kind of lurches back. So I'm going to keep his left foot here, and I want his left foot to stay on 22. I'm going to get rid of both these sets of keyframes. I'm going to delete that one and that one. So both these feet are staying nice and still until 20. Then his right foot moves forward. So let's go back to his right foot. Now I'm just going to stick to his right foot for a while for right now, and I'm going to ignore everything wrong with the left foot. I'm also ignoring everything wrong with the over rotations. Just you need to know that eventually I'm going to deal with it. We're going to work our way from the feet all the way up and then out. So the next step is the foot. So this foot here needs to come up while he walks. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go about halfway. I'm actually going to go to 26. And some people go to 8, some people go to 5. I'm going to go to 26. So it's between the two poses. So foot is down. Foot has moved forward and down. So like the old walk cycle that we practiced, but I'm going to do a much quicker fix. On 26, I'm going to pull his foot up. Now I'm going to rotate it down and maybe move it forward and up a little bit more. And I don't have to press S because my auto key is still on. And now look what happens. Now the foot, doesn't that look much better? 2 quick adjustments, and now he's almost walking properly on that foot. There's other things I could do, but I'm showing you all the quick fixes. If I had more time, I could do the toe up and the heel pivot and all that stuff. But I'm showing you very quick fixes for your animation. All right, then his foot stays planted for 10 frames, and then his foot comes up and down again, and it's a quicker step, right? So his foot really stops moving there at 50. So I'm going to delete the 45. So now his foot starts moving at 40, comes down at 50. So I'm going to move it up at 46 and rotate it back down. Maybe up even more. Now there's also a problem with his hip. It's not kind of centered over his center of balance. So I'm going to correct that too later. So now his foot plops down, and then I just keep going. And then his right foot again, his right foot starts moving at 60, and it seems to stop moving at 70. I'm going to get rid of this middle keyframe, and maybe go to 6 here, and pull it up, and rotate it down, and maybe move it forward a little bit. Okay, so problem number 1 solved. So what you want to do is you want to go through and pass through all the feet. Notice how bad the left foot looks, and notice how much better the right foot looks. The right foot's not perfect, but it's much better. Actually, looks like he has a limp now. But you do the same process with the left foot that I'm not going to spend time on this video for. If you didn't get it, just hit rewind it and just do it. Now let's move on to the hips. So with the hips, what you want to do is you want to make sure the hips are always over the center of gravity for your character. They always call it, and when I say hips, I actually mean your root control. Or, I should just change that, root. Or, some people call it the cog, C-O-G, and some people call it other things. So, pelvis is another word for it. Anyway, you want to make sure that when it's walking, it's traveling up and down. You want to make sure that it's always over the supporting foot. And you always want to make sure it moves and the feet moves. And you don't basically want just a stiff set of, you don't want a stiff center of gravity. You want this thing moving. So here's a general rule of thumb again. So feel free to get rid of keyframes. So if you got these extra keyframes here, right, go for it. Now, before you take a step, you usually lurch down. So what I'm actually going to do, and I'm actually going to use his controls. Not every controller has this, but I usually lurch down. Actually, I'm not. I'm just going to give you simple controls. Okay? Before you step, you usually have, when both feet are to the ground, your hips are normally lower than when one foot's on the ground. General rule. So, bring the hips down. Right? Then as he takes his step, this foot's up, bring the hips up. Now the other thing you want to look for is, does it look like he's holding balance? So at this angle, it does look like he's in balance. But if I were to add a different camera angle, and this is why we lock the camera, it's because you really want to only animate to your camera angle. But notice if I'm looking at him head on, he's definitely off. So what I want to do is I want to swing the hips a little this way. And another thing I might want to do is rotate the hips a little like that. And what I'll do next is I'll correct it with the spine. The spine's the next step, right? After the root, spine's the next step, and I'm going to recorrect his balance with that. So even though he looks like he's wonky, I'll fix that in a second. Then when his foot comes back down, right, I'm going to, again, pull his hips down so he looks like he's hitting the ground. Give him a little bend in the knee. Other things I can do is when both feet are down or he steps forward, usually this hip kind of favors or leans forward that way. So I gave him a little more rotation. And again, I'm going to fix it or correct it with the spine. So I've pulled the hip, when both feet are touching the ground, I've pulled the hip forward. I've pulled the hip down, excuse me, or the waist down. I'm also going to kind of pull it forward a little bit here. Now, it does look silly, but we're going to correct the back next. And so then his left foot does the same, and I'm not going to do anything for the left foot. But let's go back to the right foot. The right foot's about to take off, and let's do it here. I'm going to pull it back down, and then I'm also going to lean it forward and favor this foot this time, just to kind of pivot that all around. And again, I'm going to correct that with the spine. Then his foot comes up, he should come up. And you always want to make it look like he's able to stabilize himself or hold his balance. So make sure that the center of gravity looks or appears to be over the supporting foot. And then when he steps back down, you want the foot back down, and you want to re-rotate it. Okay. So you would do that for the entire sequence, and I'm not going to do it for you right now, but you would take care of all that stuff. All right, so what we've done is we've now made the hips move up and down. We have the foot moving correspondingly. Now, some of you aren't going to have a walk with your action here. You might just have a few other things happening, but still, you're going to want the feet to move up and down, not just slide across. So blue versus red. The red is moving more accurately. The blue is slipping around. So if you're not doing a basic walk or something like that, you're still going to need to be very cognizant as to how the feet are moving around and how they go from point A to point B, right? So that's what else you need to look for. The other thing you want to look out for on the hips is that you want to make sure the hips aren't just solidly moving along the straight line, right? You want to give them some bounce, move them up and down, rotate them left and right, give them some swag. And the reason why you do the hips first is because now I'm going to go through and correct the hip movement with the spine. So the hip has rotated over here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to recompensate the movement for the hip with the spine. So now the spine here is going to be rotated forward to kind of recreate his lunge. And then I'm also going to rotate it sideways to compensate the angle of the hip being moved. Right? The other thing is, watch the back. Just look at the back. I'm going to zoom in right on the back. You're not even going to see the feet anymore for a while. And if you look at the back remains almost perfectly still, except for the right there. From here to here, nothing is moving in the back. And we don't walk that way. So you want a lot more movement in your spine. So once you go through and correct everything with your hips, you give your hips up and down movement, you give your hips side to side movement, and you give your hips a little rock back and forth, side to side with a rotation, you then recorrect your body so it looks like he's stabilizing himself with the spine. So what I'm going to do is, his hip is rotated, right? His hip is rotated more this way to compensate for his foot moving forward, right? But we want the spine to still, we want the face here to still kind of move forward. So I'm going to take the spine now, and I'm going to rotate the spine so that he faces forward and that he is kind of twisting his body to fit more of the balance of his foot. And then also, you can also dip him this way. So the spine has a lot more movement to it. Now, I can always recompensate that with the head as well. So the takeaway here for the head and the spine and the neck is to make sure that it's not stiff all the way through. And the reason why you have to do this after doing the root, because if I make an adjustment to the root now, I have to redo the entire spine. So get your root, your hips, or your pelvis, or your cog, whatever you're going to call it, get that settled first, and then move on to the spine. Now, as he moves forward, right, he's moved his left foot forward now. I've lurched the hips forward. I'm going to want to kind of hunch him in and then recompensate it by having his neck arc back. And we have this S movement here. Now, this is not the best form, but I'm just trying to demonstrate my point very quickly. So notice how the back is no longer stiff. It's compensating and moving around. So I'm not going to talk too much more about the spine, but you should go through the pass, go through your entire sequence here, readjusting every single spine joint. Lastly is the hands. So once you do the spine, then you're going to move on to the arms and hands. All right. So we've looked at timing, we've looked at the feet, we've looked at the root, we've looked at the spine, and now we're going to just take a quick look at the arms. And there's several things you're going to want to do with the arms. Number one, fix any more over rotations like I've already demonstrated. Number two, make sure they're counterbalancing the feet and other things, right? So as you notice, as his right foot is forward, his right arm should be back, right? Swinging that forward. And if the right foot is forward, the left arm is swinging forward. Okay? So these are things you should look out for, and as he's moving along, so his right foot is back, so I'm going to swing his right arm forward. Now this is not the best example, like there's a lot of things wrong with this example here, but you're getting the picture. Just remember the walk cycle. So other places where you're counterbalancing are where the arm's doing something besides walking or just moving around. So as he's going to wind up for the throw here, right? So he's going to wind up for a throw. His other arm, if this arm's behind him, this arm should be in front of him, kind of counterbalancing it. Doesn't that look much stronger than what we had before? Instead of just one arm being raised, right? You actually want to really pretend like he's actually trying to hold himself up. So if this arm's back, he's not really balanced until this arm comes forward. So always think about that. What's this arm doing? How should this arm counterbalance? They don't have to be exact opposites. And in fact, they could be doing the same thing, but just always reconsider how everything is being balanced. All right. The other thing I want to show you was don't neglect. People do a lot of arm movements with just the shoulder. Don't neglect the clavicle. Don't neglect the elbow. Don't neglect the wrist. And don't neglect the fingers. So make sure that other parts are bending too. Like for example, in this student work, there is only shoulder movement. There should be a lot more bend in the elbow. So as his arm comes up, I should also swing his elbow in and his wrist in. Don't neglect that stuff. And then the same goes for the opposite leg, opposite arm. Pull out the elbow, pull up the wrist, and that swings back and forth. So this elbow now comes in a lot more, and then the back arm has the elbow extend and stretch out. So don't neglect, don't just work the shoulder. Don't forget about the elbow and the wrist and even the fingers, right? Make the fingers swing in and out as well. Give them some movement. Lots of people neglect the fingers. Don't be one of those people. The other thing to look out for is the clavicle, right? As his arm is swinging forward, it could also swing out in front of him, right? So I can take this front back and I can swing that there. I can take this front back of this clavicle and swing it out to the back. I'm also going to give it a bit of an up-down. So if this arm's forward and he's leaning, right, I can give this some up-down, some up-down movement to make it look like he's really balancing and twisting his body around, right? Now again, this does not just pertain to the walk cycle. When you're doing other stuff like the throw here, what's really going to help sell this throw to make it look believable, right, is I'm really going to put some up and down movement to the body. So as he's winding up, I'm going to pull the arm up like that and maybe even pull it back further. Really stretch it out like he's really winding up his throw. And if this one goes up and back, this one should go forward and down. And remember, so it's all about counterbalancing one another. So if you have Link or any other character, the clavicle is actually a bone joint, right? Instead of an actual handle right here. So don't neglect your clavicle, elbows, and wrists as you go about animating stuff.